Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the daily edition of Levalytics on video. I am your host, Jordan, and it's good to be back in the seat talking crypto markets. And, today's Monday, August 24th. The daily candle just closed, and BTC is at $79,686. So there's not much action on the market between yesterday and today, but there are a few things I want to talk about in terms of what I'm looking at in the market, things that I didn't cover in the previous video, changes I made to the Levalytics portfolio, and just relative news or even sometimes tweets and just other considerations. I actually have a list that I put together here that's obviously not on the screen that I want to talk you guys through. And once the list is complete, I will be done and you guys will be on your way. And this will, this is going to go out this evening for those who have the notifications. Otherwise, I'm going to be sending it out on Twitter and as a note on Substack tomorrow morning, August 25th. Let's just get into it. I don't want to waste any more time. So as you can see, nothing's changed here for Bitcoin. Still got blue candles printing here, which tells you that I like the market right now. It means I want to be long, bullish momentum, right? Keep in mind, red candles always signals bearish momentum for my trading strategy. And obviously we're at the resistance zone between 79K to 85K, right? You can see that there's a lot of action going on here. So if there was ever a spot that we were going to slow down for a second after this impulsive move upwards, this was probably it, right? So let's just talk about some other assets that I'm paying attention to in the market to kick things off. Let's talk AERO because this is one that I've waffled back and forth with on owning, but I repurchased it today. And I like this setup, right? It just broke out from consolidation right here, and now it's got bullish momentum, and we're just back at highs, right? We're just somebody said this today on crypto Twitter, but I can't remember who said it. But you basically get paid to buy the highs in crypto. It's like the buying momentum is the best strategy in crypto. Otherwise, you're just going to be bored, bleeding out, trying to short the market for the multiple endless years bear market. But most people aren't that comfortable shorting, myself included. And especially if you're running a spot only strategy, which, I pretty much try to avoid leverage completely. I've had my fair spells where I've done a lot of leverage trading and it's just not for me. A lot of stress and it's just a lot that can go wrong when you're trading perps, especially in crypto. If you go look back at October 10th, 2025, positions that you probably thought were safe, especially if you didn't have a tight stop on them, you got destroyed. So it's just not really the place to be for me. But yeah, so I really like this breakout from consolidation here, right? If you want to zoom in, let's go to the 4-hour time frame for AERO. Let's do this, right? You see this consolidation here. Maybe if you want to draw like a little box, a little rectangle, like this whole area here. I don't know what is going on with this drawing thing. Long story short, though, you can see like this whole area, little breakout. Pull this square down, whatever, you get it. It goes down like that. So I like this breakout. I love that they also have time. You have a bullish momentum on the 4-hour time frame. So 4-hour time frame, that means lower time frames are looking strong and higher time frame looking strong. We're attacking a high that's been tapped 1, 2, 3 for a fourth time now. That's just a good opportunity for, a breakout here, along with BTC bullish momentum, right? The best time to trade altcoins is when BTC has bullish momentum too, right? Blue candles for BTC. So all is well in that trade world. I think another asset that, I was like pretty pissed that I actually didn't get a long on that's traded really well. I know Ansem's been talking about this for a while, is Pump, right? Pump, my signal fired July 19th to get long. And unfortunately, I was tapped out of the market. July 19th, I think, might have actually even been the day that I began my road trip from the West Coast to the Midwest. So I was in a car for 10 hours the day this happened. So, I didn't watch it for a week straight. And then, by the time it was blue candles for a week straight, I'm like, forget it. It's already too late. And here we go. This thing's been ripping. At this point in time, if you wanted to ask me like what my opinion was on this chart. So if you're viewing it as a short time, lower time frame trade, it's up a lot. But since beginning of August this month, it's up more than 2x, right? So, that's a bad time to buy it on lower time frames. And if you want to buy it on a higher time frame as like a long-term investment, I don't really like it either. You should have been buying it when it's cheap. So I think for either method, I'm just kind of avoiding this, unfortunately. Sometimes when you miss these trades, you kind of have to just let them run. And then otherwise, let's look at BTC versus equities, because I do think that's relevant today. There were some things that BTC, BTC versus Nasdaq, strong blue candles, right? Looks good. BTC versus coin, not a whole lot there. Not that. Hold on one second. BTC versus SPX, blue candle. The candle closed blue yesterday, so we have bullish momentum on that for the first time in a long time, basically since October 2025. We had some blue here in May, but for the most part, not really. So things are looking strong, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. And then another thing to keep in mind, let's just go look at some equities, right? Let's go look at coin. Coin, was flirting with a blue momentum print, didn't really follow through because, equities kind of looked weak on the back end of the day. And then here's Robinhood. No, that's Hood versus coin. Hold on. Robinhood, if it taps back up to 120, I think that's a buy as well. I just love buying the highs on things. People might think it's a little bit of a crazy strategy, but it's just one of those things that, the best time to buy something when you think it's going to break out. Worst case scenario, you just get turned around at the door. But I think Hood and Coin are probably going to perform pretty well because they have, not only do they have their own exchange where you can buy and sell crypto, they also have their own chains, right? Robinhood just launched its own chain, so you have base chain as well for Coinbase. So these, I haven't really done the math on how much or looked at their financial statements for how much these things make. Obviously, Robinhood's chain is much newer, so you don't really have much of. It'll probably be tough to find data on how much money they're making over there. Over X amount of periods because it just came out, but with Coinbase, it probably is somewhere in their financial statements. I can report back on that. But if you think on-chain activity is going to pick up and there's bullish momentum in crypto, there's going to be a lot more trading. Most people trade. I feel like Base is probably the most active place to trade. Besides Solana, it's like Base and Solana at this point. Arbitrum's kind of dead. Optimism's kind of dead. So it's just about that at this point. And yeah, I think that's a pretty exciting place to be. Another thing I want to look at is gold. Hold on, let's go down here. XAU. There's signs of life here. I mean, this looks good. Gold kind of, because it's a commodity, it trades with like a lot of trend quality price action, right? Like you can get blue candles consecutively for a very long time and red candles consecutively for a very long time. Those type of assets that trade like that are very friendly for my momentum trading strategy, right? Where things just go up or down in a straight line for the most part. That's what this strategy performs the best with that going on. So gold is another thing I'm watching, especially because people think the debasement trade might be back on. So that's something to consider as well that I'm looking at. And hold on, I want to look at total 3, which is the altcoin market cap. Hold on, total 3. Sorry guys, maybe I should have these teed up a little bit better next time. Total 3, where is this thing? It's driving me nuts. Not total 3 versus BTC, that looks terrible. Yeah, total 3 versus Nasdaq. You can see NDQ. I know people use Qs usually for these things, but NDQ. Look, boom. This is the first time that's happened since October 2025, right? So there are signs of life that crypto, even outside of BTC and the majors, is just kind of ready to make a move, right? So these are the things that I'm considering in terms of assets. I think in one other thing, another asset that I talked about yesterday as well that I'm holding on to that I actually bought in advance is Virtual. Virtual's starting to look really good. Virtual was up 8% yesterday, and volatility is on the floor, right? You zoom out, this bottom line, as I talked about yesterday, this is realized 30-day volatility. And, it's the lowest it's been in years. It is basically the lowest it's been since Virtual, since Virtual launched, basically. I mean, let's look back here, right? Back to 2024. This was the up only period for Virtual. And if you want to look at Virtual versus BTC, I mean, look how compressed this chart is. Let's turn it into a 3-day chart really quick. This thing is coiled, Virtual versus BTC. I mean, this thing is flat. This is on the floor. And this gives me the vibe that if the market is actually going to move, Virtual and the AI trade for crypto might be back on. And, Virtual is the place where that got a lot of activity the last AI season in crypto. So that's something to pay attention to. That's why I bought a bag in advance. And like I said, when I buy a bag in advance, what I'm trying to tell you is that I was already buying it before this flip blue, right? This is flipping blue. I mean, the USD chart for Virtual is just flipping blue on this daily candle that just started, right? But it's been red and I just bought it because I was like, volatility's on the floor. This thing in the past has ripped super hard. And that BTC chart, the virtual versus BTC chart, is super quote. So that's something to be excited about, something I'm paying attention to. And I just did not want to, I didn't want it to run off on me without it being in my portfolio, just because that's one of those ones that can produce you a couple multiples, and that puts you in a good position with the portfolio. And one thing to keep in mind too, when I'm doing these positions, I'm putting them together, I actually don't have the chart for the size of each of these positions, but on average, I think I told you guys yesterday that I bet probably 3 to 5% of the book, and I think the value of that is just really what I can afford to lose on a trade if I'm wrong, right? So let's look at AERO, for example, just so you guys can get a better understanding of what I'm talking about by this, right? I know it's not sexy and it's like the slow way to make money, right? But because I bought AERO like today, let's just say that my stop loss is basically below where it started bullish momentum, right? That's like 15%. But let's say if I really want a lot of wiggle room and I want it to break to fresh lows here, right? It's like, okay, the chart has to just completely reverse and nuke 30%. If I'm only long with 3 to 5% of the book, that means at worst I'll lose only a 1%, 1.5% of the book if this goes against me. And also, when you look, I don't know if you guys have ever been over positioned on something where you have like one position that takes up 20% of your trading portfolio and then it just underperforms the market for a day or for a week, or it goes down and you're pissed because you're like, that single position is just killing me, right? Where the reality is that you're actually in a secular uptrend. When I say secular uptrend in crypto, it means that the entire asset class is basically pumping, right? Obviously, there will be each different asset takes a different day off, right? But if you're overly bet on a single asset, the only ones you should be comfortable betting heavier on, in my opinion, are BTC, ETH, and SOL, right? Because those always capture the meat of actually what's transpiring within the crypto space in terms of risk appetite and price performance. But these other altcoins, even if they're bigger, more popular ones, even like AERO, right? They go through periods where they can really let you down, and they might not necessarily move with the rest of the asset class, or they might just be they just might be moving particularly slow, and you don't want to be stuck sitting in that with 20% of your book, right? And then you also have the downside concerns, right? If it goes down 30% and you're 20% of your book's in it, you lose 6%. It's a lot. That way you can be wrong a lot of different times and you can slowly scale into assets. And that's kind of what I've done with the Levelitics portfolio, right? I just bet 3 to 5% at a time. I was betting 3% before, like a little bit beforehand, before this huge breakout, obviously, because the market was still very mean reverting. And to tell you the truth, I didn't expect this move. When this move happened, I was like, oh, nice. I'm already 50% long, just because I knew the market was capable of doing this, right? I knew the market could do this, but I did not expect it. I thought we were going to go sideways. I think I talked about this in a video last week where I thought the market was going to go sideways for another 2 to 4 weeks. I thought we were going to have a little bit more time, and after Labor Day, people are just going to gear up for it. What actually ended up happening is that people always front run in markets, not just crypto, in all markets. People just always front run what you think is going to happen. That's exactly what happened here. The market was like, okay, we're going to make sure nobody can get in the market. We're going to have a lockout trade. And that's why I'm kind of just bullish, because I was expecting the market to wake up. Volatility was on the floor. And there was like a lot of positive developments in crypto too. If I'm not mistaken, there might be a Clarity Act vote in September. Not that I'm expecting much from that, but I think there was just, this move is sneaky. This is a difficult move for people to have been positioned for. Now everybody's chasing. But yeah, that's why I was betting 3 to 5% before, though, when we were trading in this range. And I was just sitting on my hands holding assets because, when you think the market's just going to remain sideways, I'm not trying to overly sweat things. I didn't really think that things were going to take. But now when I'm making these bets, right, when I'm getting long AERO, I'm expecting this thing to move. I'm not really expecting this thing to just go back down here and waffle around. That's why it's an easy stop loss for me that if we get a reversal down to this level, right around here, right before the first blue candle printed, it's like, all right, this thing might be cooked. This thing should be moving. If we're doing a lockout trade, we're going to lock everybody out. We're not going to reverse this early in, especially right? There's a little bit of a pop in volatility, but not really. It's still on the floor compared to its respective historical differences, right? Like this used to be the historical floor going all the way back to September 2024. We went below that. We're just recovering back to that level. So there's no reason for this thing to dump back to this level unless we're just remaining in sideways price action. I think this thing is either going to go for it or it's not, right? Or we're just actually stuck in more mean reverting price action. So we'll see what happens, right? Look back at this BTC chart. I mean, this thing looks strong. It would not surprise me in the next couple of days before the week closes, at least, we get an uppercut type move, because I think I showed you guys this in a prior video. Let's show you open interest. No, breadth open interest is what I want to show you. 1 second. Sorry, guys. This thing needs to load. This chart here shows you the percentage of perpetual swap pairs on Bybit that have had an increase in open interest over the past 7 days. But you can see right here, August 19th, a lot of open interest had built up. This means a lot of people were levered up while the market was moving sideways. Price pumps, boom, this value goes down. What this value going down means is that a lot of shorts got steamrolled. A lot of open interest closed, which means it was probably a short squeeze, which means a lot of force buying on the way up here. So, this is the initial bump upwards, right? The first move that off the bottom is a short squeeze, and then hopefully you get spot flows kicking in from there, right? So, something to pay attention to. Let's talk about some other charts too. Contraction, expansion. Oh yeah, let's show you this really quick. I keep talking about volatility. I keep talking about a single asset basis too, but I really just want to show you, if you look at the across the board, right? The blue line here shows you what volatility look like, right? Starting from the Pico top. Let's look at it. It's just been drifting down only for a long time. You see that? So, volatility is still on the floor despite the pop. Boom. We still have a lot of explosiveness that we have in the tank right now if the market really wants to rip higher. So, it's still early, still time for action, but it also doesn't rule out, like I talked about with you in terms of that AERO trade, is that there is a possibility where, if this thing dumps back down here, it's because obviously we're still in a low volatility mean reverting environment. But it also means, right, the trade that I'm making is that this is gas in the tank for a huge move upwards. So that's something that I'm paying attention to and that I'm expecting moving forward, right? So, I want to see this thing go for it. If we're going to do this, let's do it. I think another chart that we should pay attention to here, by the way, is MSTR, MicroStrategy. And let's look at it, right? No, that's Microsoft. Let's look at MicroStrategy. Okay, so it was up around 3% on the day, right? But it's still printing red candles, bearish momentum, nothing too exciting here. Let's compare it to BTC. This chart here shows MSTR divided by BTC. I would, for a long time, people were like, oh, DATs are levered bets on crypto, on whatever crypto asset that the DAT decides to accumulate. I think in the case of MSTR, there is a non-zero chance that this thing drags after this whole Michael Saylor debacle, and he's offloading coin to make sure he's got financial runway. And I think there's just a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. So that's something to pay attention to. That I would not touch this right now. I think I would wait for the market to show me that this thing actually has the legs, this thing has the juice, and that people are interested once again in doing business with Michael Saylor from a speculative standpoint. That is, right, when it comes to just buying something. Because let's look at some other DATs. I don't have Bitminer on here for some reason. That's really dumb. BMNR. Let's look at it. Bitmine. Yeah, see, Bitmine's moving, right? That's the difference here, right? Bitmine's got blue candles, got bullish momentum. It's trading like a levered bet. It was up, 6% on the day. It outperformed ETH. Let's actually compare it to the ETH USD chart right now. Let's see how it's performing versus ETH. Sideways though, yeah. I mean, it's got a chance at least, right? You got blue candles here while the price is going sideways, whereas MicroStrategy has kind of underperformed BTC for a while. This thing gets a little pop here, that might be worth buying and paying attention to. I think there's SBET is another one. That's another popular DAT, if I'm not mistaken. Up 4.5% on the day. See, it's starting to show some bullish momentum. So there's something that's stinky about MicroStrategy. That's something to pay attention to, not something that, I think, you make sure you're using your critical thinking instead of being like, oh, this is the way it always is with the DATs. It's going to outperform BTC if BTC pops. I would actually be more interested in buying HOOD. Like I said, this chart will get a bullish momentum print if it taps up here, right? If it taps up to 120 again, I would just buy that. And I think it's going to get hammered, right? I think there's just exciting momentum behind not the project, the company, when it comes to its move to tokenization and moving things on chain, right? And that's why probably why you look at Lighter. I mean, this thing's been a beast, despite the fact that it had a kind of a down day after reversing a bit of a pump. I mean, this thing's a beast too. They partnered with Robinhood. That's a beauty. And as you can see, the market's waking back up. And the number one thing you want to know, right? You're like, all these assets that I talked to you about yesterday, they're all just nothing really happened. If you think today was a bad day, then you were really over levered. Things still look like everything's just hanging out at the highs. This kind of feels like an invitation for people to start shorting before they eventually get steamrolled. Hold on one second. I need to look through my list a little bit more, make sure I didn't miss anything. Should be 0% of assets sideways. Percentage of assets that are sideways. Hold on. This is another chart that I wanted to show you guys, because this is worth paying attention to as well. This yellow line shows you the percentage of assets or perpetual swap pairs on Bybit that had traded sideways over the past 90 days. And we're kind of, for some reason, this isn't updated since August 20th. I don't know what the deal is with that, but I'll check in on that. But long story short, this has been hovering at high value levels for a minute here, as we had this build up here during July and the beginning of August. So, we've had a good build up in the tank. And I think that there's going to be a reckoning one way or another. And then one last thing I wanted to show you guys before dropping off. I like this tweet. I originally started trading crypto because of an easier market to trade. Equities were for long-term investment. Trading was extremely difficult. Literally the opposite now. Crypto is the best for long-term allocation, equities for trading. And I think, basically what's going on in crypto is that there's definitely a change in the guard when it comes to people getting excited about the fact that there are fundamental plays and real projects actually making money in crypto. The problem is that the people, everything else is very difficult to trade. And I think I mostly agree with this tweet. What I really want to say, though, from my 2 cents, is that crypto is the hardest market to trade 95% of the time, right? Because it's just, most people only get long, right? There's like some of these funds that just basically specialize in shorting crypto and shorting dog shit assets. Not that I'm, calling SPX 6900 a dog shit asset. It's just like the chart that I'm looking at. But any asset that doesn't actually make real money or have like a real fundamental value prop and it's purely speculative, these assets always just trade down. They bleed out for years at a time. This thing basically, let's look at SPX 6900, August 25th, August 2025. It has been a full year of down and then sideways. We haven't even broken out from the bottom. So it has been a very, very long bearish period for crypto. And this is what I'm telling you, that 95% of the time, these crypto assets trade like crap. But I think there's a 5% of the time, right, where things are very easy and very obvious. And I think there's a non-zero chance that we are at the beginning of that period. And like I told you guys before, if you look at volatility, it's on the floor. So this is the beginning. If you think you missed the move, if you really want to zoom out too, let's go all the way back to the presidential election of November, December 2024. It is basically, volatility has been down only, right, since that period. So for altcoins, it has been a very long bear market. We're almost coming up on a 2-year bear market for altcoins. So there is gas in the tank. A lot of assets have just died, lost money, and I think there are signs of life that there's risk appetite in the market. I'm going to show you one more chart here before dropping off, and it is the funding rate for, hold on one second, the median funding rate for the 10% most expensive perpetual swap pairs to get long, right? So anytime this thing flatlines, right, because this top 10% of perps, what this means is these are the assets that people are the most bullish on. The apes are paying the most in funding to get long, right? Anytime this thing is flat, that tells you there's zero risk appetite in the market. That means that the most expensive perpetual swap pairs are just trading it flat, which is not a good sign. That means there's just nobody willing to take on any risk, right? And every time these things pop is always when the market moves up, right? It's always in bullish price action. Otherwise, when this thing flatlines, you might as well not even bother in the market. What we actually had before this pop, starting at the end of July, right after this huge dump, things kind of just were not fun for a while. But starting in the end of July, you started getting a flurry of this thing popping up again. And that kind of in advance kind of gave you the signal, hey, there's some risk appetite in the market. I think one thing that I'm paying attention to, though, that I actually built a chart for this, but I forgot to have it prepped for this video, was seeing what part and what role these new equities perps are playing in these funding rates. And what I actually started doing is that I built a chart that compares the BTC funding rate versus the average equity funding rate on Bybit. And that can give us a better context and idea of what's actually going on in terms of like which assets are people actually more bullish, right? If the BTC funding rate is higher than the equities funding rate, then you could assume that people are expecting BTC price action to be better. So I won't spoil it for you what the actual results look like, but I'll share it with you guys tomorrow in the video. And the beauty of me doing these videos every single day is that first of all, if these videos are not entertaining, or if I'm not giving you guys enough info, just please let me know. But otherwise, what I want to tell you is that the beauty of doing these videos is that if I think about an idea and I don't get it into this video, I can just do it the next day. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else going on that I wanted to talk to you guys about, but I'm still pretty long. I think if you go look at the Levalytics portfolio, let's look at this really quick. Okay, so the Levalytics portfolio construction, let's close all this out. So the dollar percentage of my portfolio that is in dollars is 12%. So I keep getting more long, right? And I'm just aggressively doing it. But keep in mind, I don't do it all at once. I'm not full stacking in a single day. And it kind of goes to show you what I was telling you about my previous strategy when I was like, oh, I only add 3 to 5% to any position that I get excited about. When you're doing that, it also helps you be more tactical in terms of the speed with which you deploy. That way you don't get steamrolled right away. And that's another thing to keep in mind. So that's what's going on here. If you see this line trending down, that means that I am getting excited and that I have less cash that I'm holding on to right now. Let's go look at the Levalytics portfolio performance. The blue line is Levalytics, and the Levalytics book is still down 22.71% since inception. BTC is down 33.45%, and God, this is driving me nuts. And then altcoins are down 52%. So Levalytics book is looking strong, long and strong. At this point, it'd be difficult unless BTC just sucks the air out of the room and outperforms every other asset in crypto for a hot minute. I'll lose ground to BTC, but otherwise, I'm pretty much fully deployed at this point. So I think things are ready to rip. I actually think Solana looks great, by the way. That's just another, if we're talking about the majors right now. And I gave you guys this setup yesterday with Solana, right? Where I was like, okay, you can get long here and just ride it for a second. In the stop loss, even here, if you want to keep doing it here, just wait till get back below it. Because like I told you guys, we've been in a low volatility regime. It's either going to be obvious and we're going to retap these lows and it's like, all right, whatever, we're back to sideways, back to boring price action, or it is going to be throwing gas on the fire. Things are just going to rip super hard because things have gone sideways or down for an extremely long period of time. And especially in crypto, when prices go down, volatility goes down. So there is a very good opportunity here for some poppage. I think there's been a lot of positive sentiment around Solana too. I think there's been a lot of quality developments on chain. If I'm not mistaken, they're lowering inflation. They already did that. And then also I think there's been a lot of RWA adoption on chain. So there's just a lot going on. And the beauty is I feel like these good stories always come out as price action changes. Nobody talks about what's actually going on that's quality on a fundamental basis in crypto until the price is ripping. The price always leads and then people talk about the fundamentals. ETH BTC here, another good example. I think I told you guys yesterday, the stop loss you could set on this thing is just, you get a daily close below this level where the initial pop was, then you just rotate back to BTC. That's kind of my attitude with the ETH that I hold. I have some ETH, some BTC, and some Solana. And yeah, guys, I'm in the middle of the country right now, so it's 8:15 where I'm at when I'm doing this video. But yeah, it's about to hit YouTube very soon here. And so if you're subscribed, you'll be getting that soon. Otherwise, you'll be getting this tomorrow morning via Twitter notification or on Substack as a note. I'm not sending it out as a newsletter because I don't want to spam people's inboxes. But yeah, guys, that's it. I really appreciate the time. And if you have any comments or any other things you guys want me to look at in a future video, please let me know. Have a great night or a great morning when you see this tomorrow. Thanks.